I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
The more you talk, the harder I want to hit you.
I'm happy because of being here today. Fuck you.
Come on, you want me to drive? No, you're supposed to be suicidal, remember? I'll
Anybody
drive.
a drive?
Get in the car.
Fucking shit. Fuck me in the fucking ass. Fuck you, you fucking stupid cunt.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review. And this review is going to be for the first new release of March we are looking at, and that is going to be for none other than Maggie Gyllenhaal's 2026's The Bride, which is pretty much a more Bonnie and Clyde adapted Frankenstein and his bride. So pretty much the plot of this. So Dr. Frankenstein creates, during 1930s Chicago, this creature of a dead woman with the aid of Dr. Euphornius to create a companion for the creature, and the two doctors reinvigorate a murdered young woman, and the bride is born. She is born with either of them intended, this combustible romance, the attention of police, and a wild radical social movement. Yeah, so as my reaction, what I know is back when the trailer was released, there were so many people going, yeah, this is the real Joker 2. And when I saw the trailer, I don't think I really got that vibe, but this looked very promising. But the critics have been apparently not liking it that much. But when I saw it this weekend, how was the movie? So, you know what? Fuck the critics. Fuck Rotten Tomatoes. I thought this was good. Not one of the best movies of the year, but you know what? I liked it better than a lot of professional critics did. I can have some problems with the film, but I liked it better than a lot of people did. So, how was this film made? So, it was around August 2023 when it was reported on Production Weekly that there would be a remake of the 1935 film The Bride of Frankenstein on Netflix. And it would be directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, starring Penelope Cruz, Christian Bale, and Peter Sarsgaard. That was around January 2024. It was announced that Warner Brothers was producing the film, and Anna Bening was joining its assembled cast, and Jesse Buckley was joining, who was starring Gyllenhaal's feature directional debut, The Lost Daughter, as of course the star of the movie alongside Christian Bale ironically worked with Maggie Gyllenhaal on The Dark Knights. Cruz and Sarsgaard, and according to Deadline Hollywood, Bale and Buckley were on this project before the strikes, and in March 2024, when the strikes were already over, Julian Howe came on board as star, and John Margereau and Jeannie Berling joining the following month, and June J. Gyllenhaal, Maggie Gyllenhaal's real-life brother, was also starring the film. Then Michael De Luca and Pamela Abdi, pretty much with a reputation in Hollywood for being talent whisperers with a willingness to spend, they stepped in to foot the bill after Netflix had left the project, and the movie's cost would apparently exceed $100 million. But, you know something? I don't know what Netflix would have done, but I'm glad this left Netflix. I'm glad it left Netflix. The Bride had eventually, after being shot and marketed, The Bride would have its world premiere at the Empire Leicester Square in London on February 26, 2026, and was released in the United States by Warner Bros. On March 6, 2026, and it's gotten mixed reviews from critics. And it likely won't make much of the box office this weekend because it already has Pixar's Hoppers, which honestly just looks lame, to be honest. I don't really care about that film, and I don't care if it has such a high score on Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes doesn't sell movies for me. It never has now. Alright, so here are the good qualities in the story of The Bride. So, pretty much what kind of makes The Bride actually better than what people make it out to be is that the movie basically starts off with a Mary Shelley style intro. Remember, Mary Shelley was the one who wrote Frankenstein. And the intro does tell you that you're about to see some really weird shit. Like, pretty much in a way where this time around it's like this musical multiverse chaos where actually if it's written properly, it can work. This film is not a musical, but it's got some minor musical elements in it. Like within it's either going to be genius or disaster, and somehow in a way it's both. The vibes are pretty intoxicating even when the script is fighting for life. It looks expensive, it looks dramatic, it looks unhinged from frame one. It kind of flirts with electricity constantly and it kind of shocks itself, but forgets what outlet it's plugged into. Jessie Buckley, though, commits to the role so hard, and she plays chaos like its culture, and Christian Bale really does improve the temperature of the room, and also with his performance as Dr. Frank. His screen presence is also terrific in the film. And together, their time on screen together has this strange magnetic push-pull that really carries the whole thing. Like, you can feel director Maggie Gyllenhaal is swinging for the fences every single scene. The ambition really goes out of this thing, but coherence is on vacation, and it keeps stacking ideas for the tower and acts shotgun when it wobbles. And the themes are right there, like it's staring at you. It wants to say something bold about stuff like anatomy, creation, identity. It don't really sharpen to much stuff that's piercing, and chaotic doesn't really equal fearless. Like, the attempt, though, gets admired more than the result. So, how do we start off the movie? So, we start off with Mary Shelley speaking from the afterlife in a black and white intro. And she goes that originally there was another story, Frankenstein, she wanted to tell, but was unable to due to her death. So, her spirit possesses a woman named Ida, who is living in 1936 Chicago. And pretty much then, pretty much during her trance, where she tells all this weird stuff at a dinner party, she discusses criminal activities of mob boss Lupino, and so Lupino's two thugs, they find Ida at her home, and they kill her, and they push her down the stairs. And then meanwhile in Chicago, Frankenstein's monster, played by Christian Bale, arrives at the house of scientist Dr. Cornelia Euphronius, whose work on reanimation he has read and pretty much creates a companion for him. And Euphronius, who nicknames the monster Frank, is only convinced as Frank says he thought she was a mad scientist, and so they find Ida at her grave and they dig her out, and through machinery that's similar to Dr. Frankenstein's machinery, they revive Ida. And we see a bit of a little blood smirk on her face, bruise near her mouth. Like, they really go all out here. Like, I really like this intro, so it means sure the intro does kind of get a little bit slow, but I like the idea of Mary Shelley her playing Mary Shelley in the afterlife, narrating to the viewers that about the story she wanted to tell, but unfortunately she died before she could tell this story. And then you get to see the woman that's about to become the bride's life. In a way where she does act a little bit weird, and then some mafia people find her and they kill her. And then you meet Frank, who is in Chicago. Frankenstein, who has run away to Chicago, meets another scientist, and then imagines himself wanting a companion. And then, of course, they go to her grave, and they pretty much gets this other shot of life. So, with a movie like The Bride, you think you probably get something really dark and moody, but you kind of get a more stylish Bonnie and Clyde style love story that actually does try to pull you in. It's really gothic, it's really tender, it is chaotic in places, like it should be. The emotion is really front and center, and of course, though, when things get messy, I don't really care about that stuff, though, because I did like Frank and the Bride scenes together. I like the whole Bonnie and Clyde style scenes they go on together. The whole thing really does feel drenched in longing obsession in the best way possible. And the acting is fantastic from Bale, from Jake Gyllenhaal, from Penelope Cruz, the actress for the Bride. Like, you feel every look, every hesitation, every desperate reach for connection, like, hit away. So, now, for those who were hyped for Fully Ado, it does, at least it does kind of remind those who were what they thought they were going to get emotionally with the heightened romantic, unhinged devotion. And here, it does well in actually making you believe it more than that film ever did. Now, I don't get that vibes, but for you, this does, for those who wanted that in that movie, you get that better here than you do there. Not everything still ends perfectly, but it's not really the point. It's not about trying to be neat storytelling. It's kind of about the whole weird unhinged feeling. Like The Bride is a film that's born with ambition, and it's evident from the very first minutes. Maggie Gyllenhaal is not just wanting to revisit a classic and just remake it from scratch. She's trying to actually redefine it with a new kind of storytelling version of The Bride of Frankenstein. Our proposal stems from this concern of the directors when the Bride of Frankenstein is a character that gives the work its title, has almost no voice. The intention is very clear, like to give her that voice back. It makes the film interesting, and at times it does cause it to stumble, but it still makes the film really interesting. Like, it's an undeniable courage in its reinterpretation that the director's not afraid to tamper with something the audience already knows, or take a firm stand on identity or belonging or choice. The firmness really turns insistent, and if a film wants to make its point clear, it does at a point kind of end up repeating or pointing out, explaining what was already evident, but right there. So rather than kind of strength the message, it diminishes on the impact. Like I said, there are flaws I have with the movie. It's got the courage in there where a director, really wants to show what the audience already knows, take a firm stance. The firmness, though, it ends up getting a little insistent at times whenever it tries to make the point clear. So, Ida, now we see when Ida's revived, she's a little amnesiac, retains some knowledge and vocabulary, as she at times speaks on spurts. At first, she's very resistant and doesn't really like Frank. But then Frank pretty much tells her that she's got no memory for previous life. To really say she was his bride and lost her memory in an accident, and so she does eventually start to warm up to him, and tells the doctor that revived her she wants no tests at all. And they pretty much go out and watch this movie that, Frank has been frequently we see Frank going to the theater frequently to watch all the time. And so they watch this movie that features Frank's favorite actor, Ronnie Reed, and they pretty much then dance in a club. And I'll admit, the scene at the club gets a little bit shoddy everywhere, all over the place. And it's kind of a little, I don't know what's going on, and way too strobe light. And that's the thing, I hate strobe effects. Strobe effects are never that great. And then after that bizarre little montage, they leave the club. These two men walk up and try to rape the bride. But Frankenstein, or Dr. Frank, immediately brutally kills them. Whenever the kills happen in this film, they're actually brutal. They're actually very gnarly. Right here, they actually show them killing them in pretty brutal ways. So Frank really kills them brutally, stomps on one of their heads. He tells the bride to run away when he sees what he's done, but she decides to stay with him and live life as this runaway fugitive with him. So, to escape the law, because they're now recognized by the press and wanted, they stow away in a train to go to New York. And they see securities looking through the train, and eventually a security officer finds them when it's getting through Indiana. But the bride ends up immediately killing before he can arrest Frank and throw him onto the tracks where he cracks his neck, or snaps his neck on the train tracks. And they find this hideout in New York. So, the bride decides she wants a real name, and so Dr. Frank thinks of a name after Ginny Rogers called Penelope Rogers. And so she agrees to the name and takes it, but instead just wants to be called Penny. So meanwhile, we also get another subplot with two detectives, where Jake Wiles and Myrna Malley, his assistant, are investigating the murders throughout the film. And I like this bit, where I like that while Frank and Penny have their Bonnie and Clyde-like subplot, where they're pretty much on the run throughout the entire world, and either having to kill a few victims along the way. You also get two detectives that are onto them, They're onto them and actually trying to apprehend them, investigating their crimes. So yeah, this movie does feel very Bonnie and Clyde-like if it had Frankenstein and his wife as the main characters. You really feel the Bonnie and Clyde. You really feel the Bonnie and Clyde connection here. And so, eventually, Frank and the bride check out a 3D screening of Revolt of the Zombies, and they see this couple being a little obnoxious and constantly smooching each other. The bride ends up triggering them, and they cause chaos at the screening, and they run from the police and an angry mob because they look like the monsters in the film. And so they go to a high-class party where Frank disguises as a waiter and finds Ronnie Reed, expresses his fandom, but Ronnie Reed dismisses him, and of course, then you get a little dance sequence here, where Frank proceeds to start dancing and the bride joins them. Right there, and their dancing makes other partygoers enter in trance doing similar moves. And you know something here, this in a way is kind of like those Folie à Deux musical sequences, except it's not distracting. It actually does not overhog the film. This is kind of really the one, I think this is like the one musical sequence you really get in the whole film. And you know something? It's random, but it works. It works right here, where here it's to show like Frank and the bride, Frank and Penny are actually starting to have the romantic connection right here, and it's like trying to wow awake his idol, Ronnie Reed. So it's actually fine and tolerable here. Like, and that's another thing. It doesn't over randomly interrupts a random scene. It actually is an actual scene that goes on. But then the police break into the party. Then the bride ends up holding Ronnie Reed at gunpoint, and then starts going on this rant. And then Wallace then starts to recognize her. But then Penny and Frank run away after a policeman gets killed by their actions, and they hotwire a car and they leave the city and they go on the run throughout the rest of the film. Jesse Buckley and Christian Bale make this movie really worth it. Like, they really have the Bonnie and Clyde chemistry with each other, and their chemistry is great here. Like, Maggie Gyllenhaal really makes a film that's actually worth an occasional watch. Not a repeated watch, but an occasional watch. Like the Frankenstein, the Metropolis, the tragic love story, the mixed bag of insanity. Right there. In a way, like, now, while I don't really get Joker vibes with this movie, I guess I could say some of it kind of does Joker 2 similarities. It does some of it that I could. You remember that video I made where I explained how I would have fixed Joker Folie à Deux, where I probably would have made a better one, and actually watchable one, while still not being a necessary film, because you all know Joker never needed a sequel, or in a way, just what I pretend what happens after the end credits of the first. In kind of a way, it almost is, where you have where you have two cops investigating these two's crimes, going after them, and you kind of almost have these two on the run at a New York hideout, and occasionally going on the run. Well, I kind of see some of those connections, and all not necessarily what I had mentioned, but I kind of actually see some of those things here, and it's handled pretty beautifully well. But y'all know if I did my version of that sequel, mine would have been more Scarface. Mine would not have really been a Bonnie and Clyde one. It would have been a more Scarface or Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer one. But back to this. The storyline here is simple, and it's a bit of fresh air, considering these type of films are known to sometimes get convoluted and confusing, but the plot is more to the point. The cast do well with their parts and play the roles well. There's some good eye candy for a lot of people here. There is some gory action and violence. The gothic look is really well done. There's some dark themes going on here too. And the setting of the 1930s is actually perfect. And, the movie's about, I think, 117 minutes long, or about near 2 hours. It's not bad pacing. It's not bad pacing at all. And then you get more scenes of them on the run. There's times it does kind of drag a little bit near the end. You could have benefited from like some cutting and edit. Maybe some cutting and editing could have been done there. Like maybe like the first little bits, and maybe around the end bits. But the ending itself is still pretty good and ended well enough. So now we get on to the finale of the movie. So pretty much Wiles gets injured while trying to pursue them. At one point, 1.1 cop stops him on the road. And pretty much when he kind of fucks around and kind of jokes around his apprehending of the bride, Frank kind of shoots him, but then he gets injured himself. Then, of course, Wiles then uses his injury to ask for his retirement, but his superiors say that his retirement will only be accepted because he needs a replacement. So he gives Malloy his detective badge so she could be his replacement, and so she then continues to pursue the couple, Frank and the bride, all the way to a drive-in theater because she remembers that Frank and the bride liked stopping at the movie theater so frequently. Where she's at this gas station where people that look pretty similar, and you actually, throughout the bit, you actually see this like mob of some other women followers of the bride who are inspired by the bride's crimes, are kind of going on their murderous rampages too. And then, of course, so Malloy follows the couple to a drive-in theater in Illinois, and Frank hears his beloved say that after reflecting about her past as Ida and her current experiences as Penny, like, she now just wants to be called just the bride at that point. And so, and right here, it's a pretty well shot moment where the film they're watching, The Drive-In, is pretty much the bride of Frankenstein. And they're seen together as kind of mimicking their characters' interactions together on screen, where you can see this from Malloy's perspective, where she hears the two of them as Frankenstein and his bride and the Bride of Frankenstein movie are talking to each other on screen. So this was a pretty well shot moment here. So pretty much right there, Clyde then immediately shows up and kills Frank by shooting him in the head. And so the bride runs away with his body. He drives, so she pretty much is able to escape before she's killed. And she's able to drive straight to Afronius, where she gets there back to Dr. Afronius and says she does not feel capable of reviving Frank and just wants to study his decomposition. Then, of course, Clyde is able to follow the bride back to the laboratory and then breaks into the laboratory and shoots the bride. And the rest of the police also show up and also gun her down once they get to the room she's at. And then they make Clyde escape through a window, and Malloy arrives, who then shows her badge and says remaining there is not going to really help, and they have to look in the vicinity for Clyde. So the police then eventually leave, and Dr. Afronius, that is now still possessed by Mary Shelley's spirit, revives the couple. And outside, Malloy sees bright lights shining from the laboratory, and inside the revived corpses. And inside of it, the revived corpses hold hands. And for there, it seems like that's kind of where the film ends. And the guy that killed her, throughout the credits, you see that the guy who killed her gets surrounded by the bride's followers who kill him. Pretty much off screen, you can tell they kill him. And that's how the bride ends. So the police shoot the bride and Frank dead. They're about to arrest Dr. Afronius, and Wells retires and helps these women to capture Lupino and avenge his victims. And Mallow is going to replace him. But it's kind of more an ambiguous kind of ending, because there's still some things that are kind of certain. So Afronius is able to resurrect the bride and Frank once again, but the result is unclear. Do their memories remain intact? Or will they and Afronius go to jail? Will Lupino be killed or just mutilated? And is Malloy going to actually replace Wallace as a detective? You don't really get much answers to these questions, and you just see a shot of the monsters holding hands lying on a table, and that's just kind of where it ends. So you don't really get much explanation. And that's kind of one of the other problems I have with the film, is that if they do get revived, they'll likely just go to jail in the end. I guess you can say that, and I guess you could say Lupinus, the guy who killed her, is going to get killed by the rioters. Malloy, maybe or maybe not, will end up being replacement, so maybe Wallace may or may not be able to retire. with his injury. But we never know. Alright, so now I have any bad qualities with The Bride. I would say, for bad qualities, yeah, because I still do have some problems with the movie. I'd say for the stuff that's kind of iffy, there's times the film does get a bit too bizarre. Like, there's times with a lot of squirrel abuse in the film. Some stuff with squirrels could have been toned down a little bit. There's a bit at the club where at their first outing, where the camera gets too strobe lighty and too all over the place. And that's the thing, I don't like strobe light effects in movies. It's not cool. It's way too bright. It's way too blind-inducing. The camera just goes all over the place, so you don't really know what the hell's going on. And there's times like the first act with Mary Shelley. It's a cool intro, but there's times it kind of drags out a little bit. The final act, I will admit, kind of does, at the lab, does kind of drag out a little bit of times. Like, whenever it's on the detectives or on the Frank and the Bride. But in the ending, I feel is a bit abrupt. I feel we could have had a much more simpler ending, because we don't know if they either come back, or whatever happens to the Mafia guy, or much of the retirement, or much of Jake Gyllenhaal's character, or Penelope Cruz's characters. Other than those, I would say, while The Bride is more of a streaming watch, it's still worth a watch, and this movie is way better than any of the critics are calling it or making it out to be. So yeah, The Bride in the end, I liked it better than what the critics made it out to be. I think it's much better than people are making it out to be. I'd say I'd give it a watch. I'd ignore what the critics would say. So in the end, I would honestly just stream The Bride if you want a modern 1930s Bonnie and Clyde style Frankenstein movie, and especially for the diehard Joker fans that kept demanding a sequel and instead got the shitty one they all knew. Well, I wasn't one of the people that really wanted a sequel per se, but for the ones who did, this is the closest those fans will probably get to that. So yeah. Anyways, that's it for my view of The Bride. If we're not going to rank The Bride, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you're keen on seeing a 2020s made 1930s crime chase Frankenstein movie that's similar to Bonnie and Clyde, then I would say The Bride is an enjoyable flick that is worth the watch on streaming for sure. If we're not going to rank The Bride, I'm going to give The Bride a 7 out of 10. Alright, there we go, guys. That wraps up my review for The Bride. I want to know in the comments down below what you guys think about The Bride. And until then, that will be it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you'd like to want to see more, don't forget to subscribe to Don G. Corleone.